How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiaga, live today on Monday, August 5th, to talk to you guys about some more stories around the NFL. We've already hit 3 weeks, heading into week 3 of NFL training camp, and now this week will officially start a whole week, basically, of the preseason games, whole weekend, I should have said, starting from Thursday through Sunday. We already had the Hall of Fame game already, and now we're going to have more starting this week. But on today's episode, we're going to go through some more stories around the NFL, starting with Tyreek Hill's new deal that got done on Saturday. Then also, somebody already wanting to make changes to the new kickoff format after the Hall of Fame game, plus the Steelers quarterback battle, an update on that as the days go on. But we have more topics to talk about as we go on through the show. But before I start on the first segment, I'd like to remind you guys, if you have any questions or comments you'd like to make, to please use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net. By using the link you see on your screen, I'm able to see your question, acknowledge it, read it on air, and that way get your guys' thoughts on anything I have to say, answer any questions, any comments you'd want to make. And it's also a big help for the show and the network as a whole. So if you guys would, we'd greatly appreciate it if you guys are able to use that tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net, with any questions or comments. But with that being the case now, we'll jump into the first segment. Tyreek Hill gets a new restructured contract now with the Miami Dolphins, has him signed with them through 2026 still, but the details on this new contract really broke on Saturday. That's when the news of this all came out, that Miami and Tyreek had come to an agreement on a restructured contract. The new deal is now worth $90 million over the next 3 years, still remaining on his original contract with the Dolphins, but now they add an additional $65 million guaranteed to the contract he is currently on. No added years are, added to the end of this, so it's not like he's going to ride out this contract and he has a few more years added on. It's still basically the same 4-year, $120 million deal that he got in March of 2022. He still has 3 years left on that deal, but now basically what has been updated is the amount of guaranteed money, which goes all the way up to $106.5 million in guaranteed money, which now becomes the most ever amount of guaranteed money added onto a contract without adding any additional years to it in NFL history. So that's a pretty niche stat that I thought was pretty interesting overall. But basically, the deal gets agreed between the Dolphins and Tyreek, and it was something that was basically the last thing that the Dolphins needed to do with Tyreek, just because they already extended Jalen Waddle. They already got that massive extension done with Tua Tagovailoa, and now Tyreek was really the last thing they needed to really check off of their list. And whether or not they were going to give him more money in terms of salary or, go this route with the guaranteed money, that detail was still pretty much in the gray area. But now we finally have our answer, and now also this $106.5 million guaranteed to Tyreek Hill is now just below Justin Jefferson's $110 million guaranteed for the most ever in NFL history. So he gets bumped up right there with Justin Jefferson. And like I mentioned before, their big three, essentially, Waddle, Tua, and Tyreek Hill, are now all signed through at least 2026. Tyreek Hill signed through 2026, while Jalen Waddle and Tua are signed until 2028. And if you look at, all the numbers in the total value of their new contracts going forward, Jalen Waddle's total amount that he got in his new 3-year deal was about $84.75 million. Tyreek Hill now, like I mentioned, is at $90 million, and Tua got $212.4 million going his way, which adds up to about $387 million, so nearly $400 million going to just 3 players on the Miami Dolphins. And it seems like a lot. It's a crazy amount going to just 3 players, but I think it was warranted. I think it was needed. It had to get all of this done. Jalen Waddle, obviously with his surge up until the top of some of the top wide receivers in the NFL, to have him as your number 2 is a great situation to be in. Then you look at Tyreek Hill, the season that he just had, historic, getting acknowledged by a bunch of his peers as well after this weekend. Really on Friday, he was voted as the number one player in the NFL by the NFL Network's top 100 player ranking. So that was the first time a receiver was voted as the number one player. So again, just going on this, theme of historic milestone achievements that Tyreek Hill completed in 2023. So now he gets a restructured deal. It's not like he became the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. He already set the market price when he got his new deal in 2022. Now, nobody could have expected this massive explosion in the wide receiver market, but Tyreek Hill was already at the top of the list at one point recently. So now it was more so about that guaranteed money, more so because Tyreek has stressed already that he wants to stay in Miami. He doesn't want this to become something ugly where they're talking about not extending him, parting ways. He made sure to emphasize that in some recent interviews leading up until this moment. So I think everyone's pretty much happy with this deal. The Dolphins keep together their big three players that now, bear this responsibility, being the core of this team now together for the next 3 years essentially. This is their window. This is their window now that has officially opened. I think, you felt that, talking about Tua and Tyreek's deal right here for a second, you felt that both of them, had to get done this season just because you didn't want Tua's deal, his contract negotiations to go over into the regular season. I think that's the last thing most teams want to happen. And also with Tyreek, you couldn't have foreseen him wanting to restructure his deal just because of the wide receiver market and how much it has grown over just this offseason. So that was a little bit unexpected, but it was what the Dolphins were tasked with. And now, luckily for them, they got it done. It seemed to go over pretty smoothly. Tua, not the highest paid, but he is up there, I think, now at number 3. And Tyreek Hill still one of the highest paid wide receivers. So now we're entering into their Super Bowl window. And for me, just talking initially in the AFC East, where you would obviously have to perform well in to get to the playoffs, I think to me, this team is right there with, in my opinion, the New York Jets for being the favorites in this division. I don't really feel too hot about the Buffalo Bills. I know they still have Josh Allen, but I just feel like he's going to have to do more of the heavy lifting, whereas with the Dolphins and the Jets, barring any crazy injuries or anything like that with the Jets especially, I feel like they have more of an ability to spread the wealth, not bear so much responsibility on the shoulders of Aaron Rodgers, on the shoulders of Tua or Tyreek or anything like that. They have a plethora of options that can carry, the majority of the weight any given week. And they have players also that could bear that responsibility for multiple weeks going on and on. Whereas the Bills, there's a little bit more uncertainty with them. You have Allen, obviously, but then you have Dalton Kincaid heading into his second year. Keon Coleman's looking nice. I think he's going to be their number one, but you don't really know what it's going to be like right off the bat. And also James Cook is there. I thought he had a good second half of the year last year, but just on that topic, again, it's something you're not really sure of. You wouldn't put him up there among some of the best running backs just yet. So for me, the Dolphins now getting all this out of the way, they're right there in contention for the division. They were about to win the division last year, if not, choking essentially against the Bills twice to end the year. So they're used to this sort of environment. They're used to this sort of scenario. I believe they can close the deal out this year. And just to close out this first segment on the contracts that we're seeing now, like I mentioned with the wide receiver market, the quarterback market, it's just the hierarchy now. It's pretty interesting to me how it just sort of lines up, and now how the quarterback is still, pretty much up here, right? Untouchable from any other position group in the NFL. But now you're seeing, before when Nick Bosa got his deal, becoming the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history at $34 million per year as his salary, he sort of set the hierarchy as the pass rushers being right below the quarterbacks in terms of significance to a football team, in terms of importance and, game changers that affect winning. But now the wide receivers are slowly climbing up that ladder, and now you can really make an argument that because of the contracts that we're seeing given out to Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, most likely A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, you could argue that the receivers, much like the NFL, are trending towards the offensive players really having a stronghold on the biggest contracts in the NFL currently, just because of the nature that the offense is, what's attractive. It's what brings in eyes, brings in attention. So we're starting to see, just a little bit of a shift there between the 2 and the 3 spot. And I think it's going to just become this switching of wide receivers, pass rushers for the next couple of years. Like I mentioned, CeeDee's probably in line for one. Whether or not Micah on his same team, resets the market for pass rushers will be interesting to monitor. But I thought that was also, pretty neat to see how the wide receivers have now overtaken that number 2 spot. And how long they'll hold it will be something to watch going forward. Like I mentioned, with Micah being the next guy to probably get paid and have a chance to reset that market. But overall, Tyreek gets a new deal. The Dolphins can really just focus on football now, and we'll see if they come through this year, if they get a playoff win for the first time in a long time. Hopefully they get to do that. But that'll be it for the first segment. We're going to move on and talk about the new kickoff format. After the Hall of Fame game, it didn't take long for somebody, Sean Payton, the head coach of the Denver Broncos, to suggest a change already to this new format. We're going to get into what he wanted to change specifically and whether or not we believe it's a good idea. So stick around. We'll be right back after this break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back here now on the show to move on to a more up-to-date topic, the kickoff rule, the new kickoff format that has really dominated, I think, the headlines up until this point. After the Hall of Fame game, that's pretty much what everybody wanted to see. That's what everybody tuned in to see. Not to disrespect the players on the field, but there was no CJ Stroud, no Stephon Diggs, no Caleb Williams. Everybody was tuning in to see this new kickoff format. How was it going to be, defended? How were teams going to attack it? What was it all about heading into Thursday? Last Thursday, I should say. But now, now that everybody got a taste of it a little bit, we're already talking about changes to it. We're already talking about how we can improve it, make it better in some people's eyes. It only took about 2 days for somebody, the head coach of the Denver Broncos, Sean Payton, to suggest something new to be, altered with the new format based on the rules, based on the touchback rules and how, it is laid out based on the scenario of where the kickoff goes and everything like that. He was asked about it on Saturday, and basically his main worry, his main idea with, his statement that I'm going to read out to you guys is that he's worried about, these new changes based on how the rules are laid out and where the ball is placed on each touchback. He's basically worried that nothing will actually change and that teams will still opt out for trying to kick it out through the end zone, trying to kick it into the end zone for a touchback. So that's the main idea of it, but he went more into detail of it here in the next slide I have for you guys. Here in his statements, he mentioned how nothing's really going to change. Basically saying if the analytics tell me the average drive starter or the average drive start or average return is past the 30, well, what do you think is going to start happening? Touchbacks. We're going to be right back to where we were, and that's the last thing we want. We've got to pay attention to that. And it is, it's not something like illegitimate or anything like that. It is a pretty significant concern in some people's eyes. The 30-yard line, I think before, or at least at the start of this, new proposal to change the kickoff format, was deemed as something that was a decent starting point for some touchbacks. The 30-yard line, that's already from the 30 to the 25, even the 20-yard line. It makes a significant difference to how the drive overall, goes out and plays out, and how successful a team is based on, just starting 5 yards ahead of where you usually start at the 25 from last year. And it seemed like that was already enough, but, his idea is that with the success of the kickoff returns nowadays, or how it is projected to be in 2024, if the average start is already at the 30, teams are going to relinquish that, idea of defending and just kick it out for a touchback if teams are just going to average getting to the 30-yard line anyway. So it kind of makes sense, but I'm not really 100% buying it. I am, but I'm also not, for one reason only. Just to give a little bit more context, if you guys aren't aware of the 3 different types of touchbacks that will be in the new format in 2024, the most severe touchback for the kicking team will be a starting point at the 40-yard line for the receiving team. And for that to happen, the kickoff is either going to go out of bounds, and already, that carries on from last year. If you kick it out of bounds, you're going to start at the 40-yard line. So that doesn't change. But also, with the new format, if the kickoff fails to reach the landing zone, which is the 20-yard line to the goal line of the end zone, if it fails to reach that, then it also will start at the 40-yard line. So, if you're not reaching the landing zone, what are we talking about? Actually you being on kickoffs. If you're not reaching the landing zone, that's more on the kickoff team rather than on the rules as a whole. So that's something that I didn't find too big of a problem with. The other one is the one that Sean Payton referenced in his statement. A touchback at the 30-yard line will happen if the kickoff is kicked through the back of the end zone on the fly, or if the kick lands in the end zone directly without hitting the landing zone prior to that, and it is down in the end zone, so like a typical touchback, or if it's kicked through the back of the end zone as well on the fly. And again, that's just basically the kickoff team, relinquishing any, idea of wanting to defend the kickoff, wanting any idea of trying to give up additional yards past the 30. They're just going to say, all right, we'll live with 30. You guys can take it. We're going to kick this thing through the back of the end zone. That's that scenario. And the last one would be a touchback to the 20-yard line, which would be the worst starting spot available for the receiving team. That will only happen if the kick hits the landing zone and then rolls into the end zone, and the receiving team elects to just down it and start at the 20-yard line, preventing a kickoff return from happening, just weaseling out of it, basically is how I think of it. So those are the 3 different types of touchbacks we could see in 2024, and Sean Payton isn't too content with the 30. He believes that kickoff teams, receiving teams, will be very successful in returning it past the 30-yard line, and he suggested that instead of the 30, they should move it up to at least the 35-yard line, just to assure that nobody even thinks about a touchback or any of that being of a possibility, to try and avoid the opposing team from starting at the 35 proposal. That was the original idea with one of these touchbacks, that it would have started at the 35-yard line, but the NFL changed it just a few days before the owners and everybody voted on it, because they didn't want to make it too overpowered or too much in favor of the receiving team to just start it at the 35. So they moved it back to the 30, and you guys could clearly see that Sean Payton isn't too big a fan of it if receiving teams are already going to be successful at it. Teams are just going to opt out to just kick it at the 30 in fear almost of trying to prevent as much yards in terms of starting point as they can. But further along, Sean Payton suggested something else that he would like to change, and that was the amount of the touchbacks. The 3 that I just mentioned, he thinks that's one too many. In his opinion, he said, the other thing I think is significant is I don't like the 3 different starting spots. If it's outside the landing zone, put it at the same spot. I think right now it'll take a lot of fans a lot of time to figure out the 3 spots, and That's as far as his, suggestions went. The amount of touchbacks and one of them starting at the 30, he would like it to start at the 35. And just my overall thoughts on what Sean Payton said. Basically, this is still an experimental period, I think, for the NFL with this new kickoff format. Sean Payton suggested that there probably could be, and he expected there to be some tweaks, some modifications as we go on through the regular season and probably through the preseason as well. And I would agree with that. I think right now we're only one game into it, so as more teams start to figure it out, if this week alone you see like 5 kickoff returns or something like that, or multiple in a game, maybe we could start altering some things. Right now it's very much a tryout period still for this new kickoff format. It's not like they had a season or something to really play with this. They just voted on it in the spring, basically, and now they're trying to implement it already. So there's going to be some things that don't work, some things that look a little bit funny. Sean McVay was another coach that said it just looks weird from his standpoint and how different it looks from anything he's ever seen in the NFL. So right now, it's really just taking everybody to get a good view on it, a handle of it per se, if you're trying to coach this especially. Also, I like the idea that Sean Payton mentioned, starting at the 35-yard line. I really don't want to see any teams just being chicken about it and just kicking it out the back of the end zone anyway. I just feel like this new kickoff format needs to see that change happen, needs to see these teams return kicks more often. And if teams just decide to be okay with allowing teams to start at the 30, then I think, yes, something really does need to change, or else all of this is just for nothing. So I would like to see that. And the fact that it was a rule originally to start at the 35, I think makes it a little bit worse that they sort of changed it last minute. I think they should bring it back up to the 35, just to avoid that, any sort of stubbornness from teams to have kickoff returns happening if they're defending it. And also, just lastly, on his last statement about the 3 spots, I don't think it's too hard to figure out, honestly. Yeah, it's new. Yeah, fans have no idea what this is. It's probably less than 10% of NFL fans have actually watched an XFL game to see what this new kickoff format kind of is. So to now see this on your screen, if you've never watched the XFL, don't really follow the offseason or anything like that, and really know too much about this new kickoff rule, it probably looks like something it doesn't even look like probably football to some fans by seeing this new format. But I don't think it's too hard to figure out, honestly. Once you look into it more, find the rules, it's not too hard to decipher between the 3 spots at the 40, at the 35, and at the 20-yard line, or at the 30, I should say right now. For Sean Payton to suggest that if it doesn't reach the landing zone, you should put it still at the same spot, the 30 or the 35-yard line, that's the one rule that carries over from last year. If you kick it out of bounds or it's just a missed kick overall, it goes to the 40-yard line. So that's the one rule that kind of carries over. So to change that one, I think is a little backwards, honestly. But again, I don't think it's too hard to figure out the new ones. And it's really not about, honestly speaking, it's not really about fans trying to understand it, because it's going to happen either way. This new format is going to happen whether or not fans understand it. But in a way, you'd rather have more fans not understand it and have it be the right decision than the other way around, and having fans, completely know it, know what's going on, but still hate it because they don't think it's a right rule, or they don't think it's improving the game anyway. So if some fans have to take that little bit of extra time to go out of their way, look up the rules, and figure out where is this team supposed to start, the 40, the 30, or the 20 in each of these scenarios, it's not going to be that hard. And I think a lot of fans are going to like it, honestly. I think it's going to be a good change if, and only if, these NFL teams don't just opt out and decide to just kick touchbacks a lot during these games. I think if it produces the changes we want to see and we see a lot more returns, then this will be only a beneficial thing for the NFL. We're going to see more players become more important in the 3 facets of football, not just defense and also offense, where it's heavily dominated already, special teams can become something of an importance. You could see random players you've never even heard of, make a name for themselves, and now they become a vital piece to a championship-winning team or something like that. All of this, I think it only makes it better for players to earn roster spots, NFL to be a lot more innovative and creative and bring something that's unusual, uncomfortable, ugly at times, and I think it all will be for the best overall. I'm a big fan of it. Sean Payton, I like some of his suggestions, but again, I think it's fine the way it is right now. The only thing I would change is the 30 being the touchback starting spot. I would change it to the 35 to make sure no team has any idea of trying to just kick touchbacks for the sake of it, but it is a big change coming, so let me know what you guys think of it. Are you guys for or against the new kickoff format? Do you think it will improve or not do anything at all to the NFL and seeing more action on kickoffs? Leave your guys' thoughts in the comment section, but that allows us to move on to some new topics during the rest of this show. We're going to talk about some more of the Steelers quarterback battle. Arthur Smith now talking about the creativity that Justin Fields brings to this offense, and also Justin Jefferson talking about how he plans on staying healthy the majority of the season now that he is the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. Those topics are coming up right after this. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Rejoining the show now, the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, to talk about a situation that I think has been growing a little bit more as we've gone on through training camp, and it has been the Steelers quarterback battle up until this point, because in all honesty, I think this has gone in a completely different direction than I think a lot of people would have guessed. Just because initially, at the start, when the Steelers signed Russell Wilson, they also brought in Justin Fields. Right away, the thought was, we heard it ad nausea from the media, from Mike Tomlin, that Russell Wilson was in pole position to be the starter. And again, the original plan with Russell being the penciled-in starter was for Russ, to lead this team, maybe short-term, and have Justin Fields, develop, learn from Russell Wilson anything that he can to potentially step up and be the starter eventually in the near future. But the weird thing about that is that both of them are on contract years, so to think that you have time for Justin to sort of develop into something past this season, he might not even be on the team past this season. So originally, right off the bat, it wasn't something really a well thought out plan. Honestly, if people truly believed that that was going to be a viable situation for the Steelers to go down. But right now, like I said, it's gone in the complete opposite direction, because Russ hasn't even taken part in training camp fully up until this point. It's all been about Justin Fields, and the main thing coming out of camp is that he's been looking great. He's been looking very efficient, been looking strong there as a quarterback, not just running it, because obviously that is what he is known for, the athleticism, just the speed that he brings at his size. That's been present pretty much at every camp, at every practice so far. But his arm, the accuracy, the ball placement, the connection, most importantly, that he has been developing with George Pickens, has been very good, especially with all the other wide receivers as well. And on that topic of Justin Fields just continuing to impress, we could potentially see Russell Wilson be joining the rest of this group tomorrow, actually, their next practice. So he's been sort of in and out, hasn't been fully participating. He has taken part in a few warm-ups, some 11-on-11s where he hasn't really had too much mobility. But now, tomorrow could be the first time he's fully cleared to practice fully, so we'll keep an eye on that. But I think Justin Fields now has impressed everybody so much and has done it at such a fast pace that people are starting to think that, oh, maybe Justin could actually take this spot right off the bat in week 1 or something like that. Maybe it's a lot closer than originally thought, with Mike Tomlin saying that Russell was in pole position. That's still the general consensus, I think. We still hear from insiders and just reporters that it is still believed that Russell probably will be the starter up until this point. But just from what I've seen, I think it's hard to sort of bat an eye away from this issue now. And especially the way you heard Mike Tomlin talk about Justin Fields, and now Arthur Smith said something pretty interesting that I think makes me believe that something could be brewing here, basically. I'll get fully more into what I want to say after first I show you guys what Arthur Smith said about this situation. He brought it up here in just a second. Here it is, on Justin Fields and his skill set. He said, he's a dangerous football player with the ball in his hands. It allows you to get creative. Maybe you change up a little bit of a defensive game plan for him. Certainly, he adds a different element. And that creative word is what I fully picked out of his statement. That's the one word I really think makes a difference in how he said it. Because when you think of creative, you think of unpredictable. You think of hard to game plan against, like he alluded to in his statement. And that's everything that the Steelers haven't been in the last few years. They've been all but unpredictable. They've been vanilla, boring, monotone, just a bad sight to see in a day and age where the NFL is all about motion and trickery and wow plays and just great offensive execution, great scheme, great play calling. From top to bottom, from some of the best teams in the NFL. And the Steelers have really just haven't been that at all. Again, it's a miracle that they made the playoffs with the type of offense that they had. But now that they brought in Arthur Smith and he's using words like creative, it gets fans excited and it gets you to really think that, in my opinion, Justin Fields, in the way that Arthur Smith talked about him, adds that creative ability, adds that it factor that the Steelers haven't had in their system, in their organization for a while now, and that's why they've just been stuck in the same gear for the last few years. And to continue on to that point and get to my next point on the whole idea with this statement, Arthur Smith continued on to say there's a lot of things we can play to his strengths, and that's exciting. Sometimes we're asking him to be aggressive, even in 7-on-7. You have to try to in practice. Nobody wants to see negative plays, or if he just checks it down. We got to see what he can really do and what he can see in the pocket and all that stuff. Him having more reps is accelerating that process. And again, that last statement there, where Arthur Smith says him having more reps is accelerating the process. That's the biggest thing, I think, with all of this. Surprising everybody, like I said, Justin Fields is in a spot right now where people probably thought that we're going to see this Justin Fields probably into September, maybe October, but now right off the gate, he's looking very much equipped to lead this offense based on his skill set and impressing everybody with his arm. And just from what I've seen in training camp, following it on my phone as much as I can through Twitter and things like that, all the updates that the reporters post and things like that, you can see that Arthur Smith's offense and his scheme is really heavily based around a lot of RPOs, a lot of zone runs, play actions, bootlegs, having your quarterback bring that mobility aspect of their skill set to the overall offense, basically having it almost as a threat in there for opposing defenses to kind of game plan around. And now with that being the case, it gets me to my overall thought on this, almost like Justin Fields is better suited to fit this offense than maybe Russell Wilson is at this point in each of their careers, because Justin Fields is really heading into the prime of his career. Ideally, you'd like to think that he has another gear to reach and that he's only going to get better from here on out. Whereas Russell Wilson, you kind of know what he is up until this point, and not only you know what he is, but he kind of has lost a step a little bit in the mobility aspect of, his skill set. He's not the same guy that it takes about 8 to 9 seconds in the backfield for anybody to get close to him, to tackle him. Sort of like Kyler Murray now, he's not really that guy. He's more stationary, less athletic, you could say. So for me, in what the offense hopes to be this year for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think that maybe you could start looking at this like Justin just fits this system a little bit better in terms of being a threat with his legs than Russell Wilson does. And I do acknowledge that it is a little bit unfair to discredit Russell Wilson fully until we actually see him out there with the offense. Hopefully tomorrow we get a better understanding of everything to that point. But again, he's just not the same athlete that I think Justin Fields is. And I don't think that the Steelers want to limit that aspect of their offense potentially. When you have a quarterback that can run, you're going to have to always have somebody there to at least protect against that possibility, because if you don't, guys like Lamar Jackson, guys like Josh Allen, Anthony Richardson, or guys that can actually run and be athletes in the open field, if you don't have a guy there, if you're just completely ignoring the fact that, yeah, they are good runners, they're going to kill you for it, and then your defense gets all discombobulated. People start being not disciplined to their gap assignments and things like that. It all just becomes a big mess on the defensive side of the ball if you're not accounting for that guy being a runner. And if you have a quarterback back there trying to operate in this mobile, very active offense with a lot of deceiving factors, a lot of motions and RPOs and things like that, if you don't have that running aspect, it almost makes it easier for the defense to know that, hey, there's no way this guy runs, and if he does run, we're going to catch him 3-4 yards down the field rather than having Justin Fields back there. And if we don't account for him, he's gone 15 yards down the field in a matter of like 3 seconds or something like that. That's, I think, the biggest difference with this. Now, I am riding high on the fact that Justin Fields is looking great in practice, and that is a big difference from the game, obviously, but from what you see and just from what Justin Fields is projected to be up until this point, you need, I think, that mobile quarterback right now to really get everything out of this offense that Arthur Smith wants to get out of it, because you already have the 2 running backs in the backfield, and you add a third one, sort of, with Justin Fields, someone that could actually has shown to really throw the ball well in this offense, at least up until this point, then it becomes a big issue for the opposing defenses. You're going to have to bring more guys closer to the box, leaving your secondary exposed a little bit more somewhat. You can't protect over the top as much. And for the Steelers to not have that bona fide number 2 wide receiver makes it easier for guys like Calvin Austin, Van Jefferson, Roman Wilson to get open in some easier coverages than it would if you didn't have that running aspect, that running threat in Justin Fields. That's just my mindset. Maybe Russell fits this offense a little bit better, but that is a little one-sided just because we haven't seen Russell Wilson, but just based on everything we know about each one, that's how I'm feeling about it. I personally didn't think Justin would look this good. I thought it would be more of a struggle, but I've been pleasantly surprised. I'm looking forward to seeing Russell Wilson out there because from what I've seen still so far, the arm accuracy, the placement looks good. I just want to see what happens when maybe the Steelers defense so far through practice knows that Russell really isn't going to run to the level of Justin Fields, and how that maybe makes it harder for the offense, or if it just changes anything at all. So I'll be watching that. I'm sure I'll update you guys on that as it goes on, but that was something based on what Arthur Smith said that caught my attention, and how maybe they're thinking about that possibility as well. I'm sure they're also pretty surprised that Justin has been as effective as he has been so far, but we'll see. That's one of the more intriguing quarterback battles, or just battles in general, that we're going to monitor throughout the rest of training camp. Once the preseason starts, it's going to be super interesting to follow. But now we'll put a pin in that conversation. We'll leave it to another day, and we're going to talk about Justin Jefferson and how he's working through that injury, making sure he gets to being his absolute best out there on the football field. But also, to go along with that, is that the major factor, the X factor that the Vikings need to be successful, or is there another part of this football team that needs to step up on top of that? And to round off this episode, I'm just going to give you guys some injury updates on some major players that have gone down with injuries over this last weekend. So stick around. We got a few more topics to talk about when we return after this break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Jumping right back into the show, talking about Justin Jefferson, obviously was rewarded this offseason with becoming the highest paid wide receiver in NFL history, but also just the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. And usually how it is for all the other NFL players, unless you're in that 1% of the generational alien type of players in the NFL, usually when you have a season like Justin Jefferson did in 2023, it usually doesn't bode well for you in a contract year because he missed 7 games in 2023. He only played 10 games essentially, and usually when that happens, it doesn't mean you're going to get the high extension that you've been wanting to get over the course of these last 2 off seasons. But luckily for Justin Jefferson, he's not human. He still got 1,000 yards in 10 games, which is insane. And I think he's shown enough, safe to say, that he should be paid up to that value in terms of contracts. So he got his money, but now how do we fix that issue? How do we fix that hamstring injury that was bothering Justin Jefferson all throughout last year? And really, they were in the spot to still make the playoffs, but I believe that this injury to Justin Jefferson, and also another factor that I will get to throughout this segment, is what really needs to change and what really needs to happen for the Vikings to continue to progress. But talking on Justin Jefferson, on what he had to say about this hamstring injury, he said, "I'm so scared for it to happen again. I've been overly cautious about it," and he said that he's been really focusing on treating this hamstring, not just on the field, but off of the field as well, implementing new techniques to just keep it as strong as possible and make himself injury-proof, like he said, going forward. And it's a different scenario because Justin Jefferson, I'm almost positive he said that this is his first type of injury that has kept him out for this amount of time. He's usually never hurt throughout his time in college, and especially in the NFL. He's always pretty much been present there for the team he plays with. And now for something like this to happen to you, I'm sure it's a major shock, a major bucket of ice water to just sort of humble you in a bit, to make you realize that this is a possibility, especially also now that you got this massive contract. You want to go out there and prove that you deserve it. And now Justin Jefferson and how the Vikings are trying to help him through it. They're implementing a lot more rest days. It's sort of a schedule of on and off, alternating days up until this point, making sure that he goes 100% in the days that he is practicing, but a lot more off days being implemented so far already for Justin Jefferson, which is crazy to think about because he's only about like 25 years old, and now to almost have, not to have a complete veteran schedule. You know how veterans have a lot more off days as they become older into the late 20s, mid 30s or anything like that, but he is still only 25 years old. So I thought it was a little just weird and off-putting that already he's on this sort of schedule, and he felt weird about it as well. He brought it up in the interview that he doesn't like to think of it as a veteran schedule, or just basically doing whatever he can to the best of his ability to just be healthy. And if it requires this, that's just the matter of fact. It is something that he is just going to have to do. But on top of it, the Vikings are doing their part. They're monitoring the amount of yards he's running day in and day out of practice, how hard he's running those yards, how the the amount of yards he's running, how fast he's running them as well, and also the amount of weight he loses after practice. All of that combined into figuring out this game plan that they have for Justin to keep him as healthy as possible. And almost with this being the case, it almost ensures me that we're not going to probably see Justin Jefferson in the preseason, if I were to guess. Maybe for a drive or something like that at most, because I do fear that stepping back into the NFL cold like that doesn't really do you any favors. But I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if they held him out of preseason. And he's just basically focused on making this as strong as possible, because it's still in the back of his mind a little bit, and he wants to get back to playing freely, as he did throughout basically his entire career, not worrying about injuries because it's never really happened to him. So it all really is more of a mental thing, especially with a hamstring injury, because, not speaking from experience because I've never had a hamstring injury or anything like that, but I can only imagine, these tissue injuries on the severity of them. It could really happen at any given point, and how fast-paced, how intense everything is in an NFL game, and how you get hit and everything like that. I'm sure it affects everything. So he's still playing a little cautious, a little bit with a scared mentality, I would go as far as saying, but it looks like he's pretty much close to as healthy as possible leading up until training camp. Up until this point, he's looking good out there. There have been some clips you see of the connection with Sam Darnold, and the only real worry you have about this new regiment for Justin Fields is that, he's not out there as much, and how will that affect maybe any chemistry issues or anything like that with essentially two new quarterbacks. But, on that topic, Justin's Justin. He's Justin Jefferson. I don't think it really matters too much, but that's the only thing I could really think about as to how this could be not a complete positive thing for Justin Jefferson. And that's obviously a major part to the Vikings, right? Having him out there because of how talented he is, highly regarded among his peers, considered one of the best, if not the best, receiver in the NFL. But to me, talking about the Vikings and where they are as a team now, getting his contract extension out of the way now focusing on going forward and getting better as a football team, and what needs to happen, what factor needs to be in place for them to do that. For me, I think having Justin Jefferson just out there and healthy, producing, is the bare minimum that this team is going to need to be the team that they want to be in 2024. To me, the main factor going into this year is the defensive side of the ball, but specifically timely defense and clutch defense, if that makes sense, right? Because I think at certain spots last year, in those critical moments where your defense is out there, where you need a stop, and I think I saw it in the receiver series on Netflix where, the Vikings defense is out there and they need a stop from their defense, obviously, to preserve a win or have a chance to win in the game against the Detroit Lions late in the year. And they came up short. Obviously, the Lions ended up winning that game. And it's those sort of moments that, one or two isn't the end of the world, but a lot, when it becomes a consistent theme and a bad habit, that is where it really separates the best teams, the good teams, from the playoff teams, from the great teams that are actual contenders in the playoffs and going forward. And like I said, once it becomes a habit, a consistent thing that happens, that's something that you need to worry about, because last year the Vikings lost 8 of the 10 games that they lost by 7 points or less, and of those 8 games that they lost by 7 points or less, half of them, 4 of them, they lost by 4 points or less. So you could say, obviously, you could say more offense, but I don't know how much more they'd really need offensive-wise. That's still always something that teams want to improve upon, the offensive side of the ball, but I don't think they need to improve that much when you have Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Aaron Jones back there as your running back, a decent offensive line as well. I don't know how much better you can get on that side of the ball. So really, it just comes down to the defense at certain points of the games, giving up these late leads, and then ended up losing by 3 points, 4 points, 5 points, 7 points a lot of the times. Those are big moments. Those are big scenarios where it could swing the momentum of your team. If, say, you lose 2 games in a row like that, it's a real momentum killer and just a morale killer in that locker room, because once it happens, having it happen 8 times to 5 times is crazy. If you're the head coach and that happens multiple times like that, what can you say in that locker room after the 4th or 5th time that it happens? You can imagine it's frustrating as a coach, not only seeing it, but as an offense as well. If you're putting up 20 to 25 points each game on average, and you're still seeing your defense give up late leads like that, you feel so helpless on the sideline, and you're almost not wasting it, but having a player like Justin Jefferson having crazy games and still coming up short, that's the last thing you want to happen in those scenarios. And to the Vikings' credit, they did improve this year on defense. They added Blake Cashman as a linebacker. They drafted Dallas Turner. They signed Jonathan Grenard as a pass rusher. So I think from the second level down to the first level on defensive line, I think they're pretty solid. But still on the back end in the secondary is still their weakest point, in my opinion. And that really can't be the case in this day and age, just in the NFL, with how heavy it is based on the offensive side of the ball. And especially in that division, because of the level of quarterbacks that you have. Jared Goff, Jordan Love, Caleb Williams now also. All 3 of those guys have the talent, it seems, to be top 10 quarterbacks, top 8 quarterbacks, at least from a talent standpoint, and the weapons that all of them have available to them. You can't have the guys that are covering them be your weakest spot. So for me, that is still a touchy subject. If they could survive a lot better than they did last year, then those 2 to 3 wins that they could get by winning those one-possession games, I think are going to make the difference, and that's something that we need to see at least a little bit improvement upon in 2024 to give the Vikings the best shot of winning, because I think their offense is good enough to where if this defense holds opposing teams to 20 points or less on average, I think this offense is that good to win games if they're only giving up 20 points per game. That's just how I feel about them. I really like how this offense is going. And last year they were still pretty decent, having 3 different quarterbacks be the main guy at various points of the season. So if they have an established guy like Darnold or JJ, whatever the case may be, it's still going to be an improvement. And if we do see that improvement, I like the Vikings' chances at least to be more competitive and have one of those close games swing their way in 2024. But that's what I believe needs to be something else that needs to step up in 2024, apart from just having Justin Jefferson out there. Yes, that's the major thing. But if you don't have that defense, I still think the Vikings are going to plateau around 500 to being an average team in the NFL. But that's just me. Leave your guys' thoughts on how you feel about the Vikings, how confident you are in that defense, how confident you guys are in their quarterback situation. Tell me what you guys think about it. That's how I feel. But now, for the last segment, I just thought I'd recap some of the injuries that have been happening throughout the NFL so far. We've had some major ones over the weekend, so I thought I'd touch up on those and just provide you guys some updates on the length, the severity of some of the major players around the NFL throughout training camp. So when we return, we're going to talk about that just quickly here before we wrap up today's show. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show. And with training camp, ramping up a little bit more, we have some joint practices getting going this week. We already saw today how the Giants and the Lions got into it a little bit in some fights that broke out on the first day of joint practices. So the intensity is ramping up, but with that, the unfortunate side of it is that we do have injuries, and not only injuries in general because that happens, but to some of the major players around the NFL, and it is cutting it close a little bit with some of these injuries on whether or not they are going to be available to play in week 1 in some of these games. So I'm going to update you guys on some of them, some of the major ones that we saw over the weekend, starting off with DeAndre Hopkins. He went down with a knee injury, being called a strained knee, and he's expected to be out about 4 to 6 weeks. Unfortunately, that happened last week. He missed practice on Friday and Saturday, and like I said, 4 to 6 weeks is now threatening the possibility of him being out there for their week 1 game on September the 8th. So Friday and Saturday, that was the 2nd and 3rd of August, about a month from now. It would be pretty close in terms of 4 weeks. If we're talking about 6 weeks, then yeah, probably he will miss it. I think it will be right up until the last second, most likely, probably leading up into Sunday morning of that week 1 matchup. But you don't want to make it worse by rushing him back. We're only really talking about the first week of the regular season, so of course no one's going to be close to 100% or anything like that in terms of final end product, playoff product. So I wouldn't rush DeAndre Hopkins back. I know you want to have him out there. You want to see what this whole offense looks like. But with a strained knee and how touchy it could be at times, how it could become worse, potentially lingering if you rush it back or anything like that, that's the last thing you want to happen. And the Titans are in a situation where Hopkins isn't really just their only receiver anymore. They did a good job of spending a lot of money to go out and get Calvin Ridley, and he was the Jaguars' best receiver last year. So at worst, you have the same situation that you did last year with Hopkins, but now you have it with Ridley, at least for week 1. And also they went out and signed Tyler Boyd as well. So those two guys, just having those guys in there, yeah, it's not the full array of the arsenal that you want to have, but it's still a major improvement from what you had last year. And still, the biggest deciding factor is not whether or not you have all those receivers out there, is whether or not you have Will Levis playing at the level, progressing in his second year as to where you'd hope he'd be. That still remains the biggest factor in all of this. And if he is playing great, and if he's playing at the level that fits this offense, then I don't think there's too much to worry about in terms of Hopkins missing a week, maybe even 2, at worst case scenario. So yeah, it stinks. Yeah, it's an unfortunate thing to happen to Hopkins, your leading receiver, but I think the Titans have done a good job of addressing it, and if he misses it, it wouldn't be the end of the world. So that's where Hopkins stands. Unfortunate, he's dealing with a strained knee, but we'll move on to the next couple guys here playing for the same team. The Cincinnati Bengals, their 2 main edge rushers, Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard. Both of them are dealing with not major injuries, but just ones that are lingering, kind of just working themselves out as we go on. And by that I mean, Trey is dealing with a chest bruise, so, the timetable on that, I'm sure it varies just on how he's progressing through it and how it just naturally works itself out. And also Sam Hubbard is dealing with what is described as a bulky knee. And on that topic, Zach Taylor, the head coach of the Bengals, said that they're taking it week by week. They themselves don't really know how to put a timetable on it. Like I said, it's just weird injuries, the nature of both of them. So they're taking it just day by day, week by week. But what's uneasy about it is that Trey Hendrickson, the situation that happened with him this offseason, him wanting a new deal, that as a fact, he wants a restructured deal at least. And because of that, and because of the, stagnant activity of the Cincinnati Bengals, he did request a trade, but he did say that he wanted to stay with Cincinnati ideally. But again, he did request a trade, so it is just a little uneasy having him miss training camp practices, and also on top of that, knowing that he wants a new contract and not practicing. It all gets a little bit weird, almost like a hold-in, but he will be back out there when he's healthy. So it is just a little bit of something to monitor there if things do take a turn for the worse. But Sam Hubbard is another one dealing with just a bulky knee, taking it day by day. And to me, the nature of these injuries isn't the worst thing. What is worrying is that the depth at this position after, these two guys go down, the depth after them, with Joseph Asai and Miles Murphy. I think they had a pass rusher actually today or yesterday go down with an ACL tear, so he's not going to be there the entire season. So you're already down one guy, and now you potentially are dealing with two of your starters being hurt with weird injuries. It's something less than ideal that you'd want to happen out there. You want to get these guys as much exposure to the practices as you can. So that is what the Bengals are dealing with. Not so much their guys, but the depth at this position. If one or both of these guys go down, what's it going to look like? Do you have the necessary pieces behind them to still keep it close to that level of production that you have with Hendrickson and Hubbard? But moving on to the next major injury, probably the biggest one, is Justin Herbert suffering from a foot injury, specifically a plantar fascia injury around the heel area, I'm going to guess. I kind of looked into it, but I'm not a doctor, so I don't want to give you guys bad information, but it's basically just a foot injury. According to the Los Angeles Chargers website, Herbert will be in a boot for the next 2 weeks before he gradually returns to playing in practice in training camp. And the initial feeling right now is that he should be ready for week 1. Again, it is another situation where it's sort of cutting it close. It is unfortunate because with all the newness around the Chargers, new head coach, new OC, new receivers, pretty much new everything on that side of the ball, you ideally would have liked to seen Justin Herbert out there at least in preseason for a drive or something like that to test it out. But I think it's highly unlikely now that he does that, obviously. And to make matters worse, Adam Schefter from ESPN said that because it is a soft tissue injury, it could linger potentially. And Schefter said that he could have discomfort potentially all season if it's not dealt with the appropriate way. So that's obviously something you don't want to hear. I'm sure the Chargers are going to be overly confident, or overly cautious, I should say, with Justin Herbert and this soft tissue injury. Arguably the worst ones to have for Herbert, and all the hype around the Chargers. This is the last thing you want to see, and I'm sure they're going to be cautious with it. Hopefully he will be out there week 1, but at worst case scenario, if it could linger, I wouldn't risk it too much for him to be out there. But that's probably the biggest one. And then just to round it off here with a couple more, the Los Angeles Rams, their entire offensive line is struggling with injuries and staying healthy. Their biggest acquisition this year, Jonah Jackson from the Detroit Lions, who they signed as a free agent, is dealing with a bruised scapula, and he is expected to miss about 6 weeks, pretty much. So he is highly doubtful for that week 1 matchup. So not how you'd want to start your new chapter with a new team. That's something to watch, something to keep track of, because that is a pretty serious injury. Sort of what Debo was dealing with last year in the playoffs and later on in the season. You saw how that sort of re-aggravated itself. So that's something the Rams don't want to deal with in their scenario. Also on that offensive line, the right tackle, Robert Havenstein, also was stepped on during Thursday's practice, and he is also dealing with a foot injury, something of that degree. It's unknown how much time he is supposed to miss, but that's another offensive lineman that at a critical position that goes down for the Rams. And on the other side, their left tackle, Alaric Jackson, is also dealing with a shoulder injury, but the Rams are optimistic that he will be back soon. But that's also something you don't want to see. Arguably 3 of the biggest positions on your offensive line going down. And also with their longtime guard, Steve Avila, now transitioning over to center from offensive guard. You already have that going down, and now you're dealing with injuries. A lot of mismatching on that offensive line is less than ideal for this Los Angeles Rams team that at full capacity, this offensive line could be very, very good. But now it's just a matter of having them all out there healthy at the same time. So it is a few steps back. You know, it is a divot in the road there to kind of go over, but it just elongates the process a little bit more. We're going to have to wait to see all those guys out there at the same time. And then the last one I'll mention here today, the Tampa Bay pass rusher Yaya Diaby broke out last season. He led the team with 7.5 sacks, and now moving forward, this offseason and in training camp, the Bucs felt confident to move on from Shaq Barrett because they now had Diaby. The projection of him, the trajectory of how he was improving, made them feel comfortable that they could move on from Shaq Barrett. But he did suffer a high ankle sprain last Thursday, and that is a scary thing because it was described as potentially being worse than it originally was, but it could linger, and the severity of a high ankle sprain also varies. So it is one of those that could become worse and could just continue to be a problem if it's not addressed properly. But Yaya Diaby plans to be out there week 1, but right now you will need others to step up in case he's not there. So they're going to look to guys like Joe Tryon Shayinka, who really still needs to convince this Buccaneers team to step up in a contract year now for him. You also have Randy Gregory, who did sign with the Bucs, but he is still yet to show up at practice. So the depth at this position is not great. You're probably going to rely more on Kalijah Kancey and Vita Vea to kind of carry that weight. But it is weird just with Yaya Diaby, not what you want to see out of your best pass rusher, especially with how great he was improving. But hopefully they just take their time with it. You don't want to rush him back. That's the biggest thing with any of these, and how touchy a lot of these injuries are. They are just injuries that require time. Teams are just going to have to wait it out and see what's best for the player at the end of the day. But that's pretty much all of them I wanted to get to on today's show. Some pretty big names going down, and hopefully we don't see too many more of that going forward now in training camp, and also with these joint practices and preseason starting up. We want to have everybody as healthy as possible. But that'll wrap it up for today's show. I want to thank you guys for joining me on today's episode. Please remember, as always, to follow the show and the network on all forms of social media. And also, remember to like, follow, and subscribe. If you want to see more of this show, check out this show on both YouTube channels, the GSMC Podcast Network channel and the GSMC Sports Network channel as well, to see more content around the NFL, not just full live shows, but also YouTube shorts and individual segment videos. And as a final reminder, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time with me, Manny Maradiega, to talk some more about the NFL and all the latest stories coming out of this league. That's it for today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in yet again. I hope to see you guys back here again with me tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.